The cameras had been rolling for less than 15 minutes when the air inside the studio shifted. It wasn't a moment anyone planned, but everyone felt it. Across the glossy table, Prince Harry locked eyes with Howard Stern, his expression calm but sharpened. One line, quiet, deliberate, unshakable, cut through the noise. And in that instant, the balance of power turned. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, has spent years navigating a life that most could only imagine, born into royalty, serving in the British Army, then walking away from the monarchy to chart his own path. His causes, mental health, veterans' welfare, and humanitarian work have shaped his post-royal identity. But his critics question whether his escape from the palace was truly about privacy or about building a new kind of spotlight. Howard Stern, the self-proclaimed king of all media, thrives on discomfort. For decades, he has pushed interview subjects into corners, stripping away their rehearsed lines to expose something raw or to break them entirely. His sharp wit and willingness to go too far have earned him both loyal fans and fierce detractors. Howard Stern had been invited to co-host for The Week, a ratings gamble meant to jolt the show's comfortable rhythm. He sat back in his chair, sunglasses still on despite the studio lights, his posture loose but charged. Beside him, Prince Harry adjusted his tailored suit, offering a courteous smile to the audience before speaking about his latest Veterans Initiative. For the first few minutes, the conversation stayed on track. Harry spoke about the challenges veterans face transitioning back into civilian life, the importance of mental health resources, the need for community reintegration. He was in command of his message, measured but sincere. Then Howard leaned forward. "So let me ask you this," he said casually, though every word landed like a stone dropped in still water. "What's it like being the second most famous person in your marriage?" The room froze. The audience reacted first, gasps and a few awkward laughs. Joy glanced up from her notes, Whoopi Goldberg's smile thinned, and a camera operator hesitated mid-pan. Harry paused, his eyes narrowing just enough to signal he'd heard every syllable. His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "She's my wife," he said evenly, "not a headline." Howard shrugged, feigning innocence. "No, she's both, and she knows it, but let's be honest, the world tunes in for her. The book sales, the interviews, Meghan is the draw. You're the plus one." It was the spark that would ignite the next 40 minutes. Not just a question, but a challenge, a deliberate attempt to pull Harry out of his polished control and into Howard's arena, a place built on provocation, where the only way to win is to outthink and outlast. A low ripple moved through the audience, a mixture of unease and anticipation. Joy shifted in her seat, her hands clasped in front of her. Whoopi tried to redirect. "Let's bring the focus back to veterans." But Howard wasn't finished. "All right, let's talk about veterans. Let's talk about your gala. How much are the tickets? How much actually goes to the cause?" Harry's eyes didn't leave him. "Every number is public record, Howard. You could have looked it up before the show. But that wouldn't make for as much theater, would it?" Gasps, followed by a round of applause. Howard's smirk faded another fraction. "You think you're clever." Harry replied without hesitation, "No, I think you're used to people being too afraid to call you out." Howard opened his mouth to fire back, but Harry didn't give him the chance. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "You talk about healing and advocacy, but you're still cashing checks from interviews about how miserable your old life was. At what point is it less about helping others and more about keeping yourself relevant?" Harry didn't flinch. His posture remained steady, his voice even. "At the point when you realize that speaking truth can help someone else survive what you went through. I've met veterans, survivors, people who have told me that hearing my story helped them feel less alone. If you want to frame that as branding, that says more about you than it does about me." The crowd responded with scattered applause. Howard noticed that. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "You've traded one prison for another, Harry. You say you broke free, but you're still performing. Without the crown, without Meghan, without scandal, who are you?" Harry's jaw tightened. "I'm someone who's fought for my family's safety, who's refused to let the tabloids dictate my life, and who stood up to institutions that were too comfortable with silence. And I'm someone who doesn't need to justify that to you." The silence after that was heavy. Howard's reply was almost a whisper. "You still haven't answered the question." Harry held his gaze, the pause, deliberate. "Maybe that's because you're asking the wrong one." It was a subtle but undeniable shift. Stern's questions were starting to land flat, while Harry's answers carried weight. Whoopi, sensing the heat, interjected again, this time more firmly. "We're here to discuss important work being done for veterans, and I'd like us to stay on track." But Howard wasn't finished. "All right, let's talk about veterans. Let's talk about your gala. How much are the tickets? How much actually goes to the cause?" Harry's eyes didn't leave him. "Every number is public record, Howard. You could have looked it up before the show. But that wouldn't make for as much theater, would it?" Gasps, followed by a round of applause. Howard's smirk faded another fraction. "You think you're clever." Harry replied without hesitation. "No, I think you're used to people being too afraid to call you out." Howard opened his mouth to fire back, but Harry didn't give him the chance. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "You talk about my interviews, my book, my platform like there's some sort of crime. But you've built an empire out of tearing people apart for ratings. Every guest, every story, a notch in your belt. And the moment they stop giving you what you want, you turn on them." Howard tried to laugh it off, but the sound was hollow. Harry continued. "You've read the interviews. I've heard the recordings. The number of people who've left your studio feeling humiliated is not a coincidence. That's your brand. Mine is trying to help people survive their worst days." The audience reacted audibly, a collective intake of breath, followed by applause. Howard shifted in his seat, the easy swagger starting to erode. "You think you're above criticism?" "No. I think criticism should be honest, not cruel. And I think you confuse the two because cruelty gets you clicks." It was the first time Howard didn't have an immediate response. His hand moved to adjust his microphone, a small but telling gesture. Harry let the moment breathe, the silence itself an unspoken point. The audience leaned in, sensing the shift. When Howard finally spoke, his voice lacked the same edge. "So you're saying I'm the villain here?" Harry's reply was measured. "I'm saying you've made a career out of deciding who the villain is. Today you tried to make it me, but the difference is I've spent years being cast in that role by people who didn't know me, and I'm still here, still working, still fighting for causes that matter." He leaned forward now, his gaze locked. "You think walking away from a centuries-old institution was easy? You think putting my family's safety ahead of tradition was selfish? Maybe in your world, integrity is just another marketing tool. In mine, it's the reason I'm still alive." The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the studio lights. Howard's eyes narrowed. "Integrity doesn't pay the bills." Harry's voice sharpened, but the control was absolute. "And yet I've managed to turn my platform into something that funds mental health initiatives, supports veterans, and protects children from the kind of intrusion you've made a business out of. Can you say the same?" Howard's silence spoke louder than any insult. The audience erupted. Applause, cheers, even a whistle or two from the back rows. Harry didn't wait for the noise to die down. "I've been told my whole life to play the role others wrote for me. I stopped doing that the day I realized silence protects the abuser, not the abused. You can frame it however you want, but the truth is, I'd rather be accused of speaking too much than stay silent and watch history repeat itself."
He sat back, letting the words hang. Howard shifted again, glancing toward the hosts as if for backup, but none came. Whoopi cleared her throat, but before she could speak, Harry added, "And if the price of that choice is being called a +1, a brand, or irrelevant, I'll take it. Because at the end of the day, relevance fades. What you've done for people doesn't." The applause was immediate, loud and sustained. Howard leaned back, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but the set of his jaw betrayed him. For perhaps the first time in the interview, he had nothing left to throw. When the show cut to commercial, the energy in the studio was electric. Producers huddled in the corner, half whispering, half celebrating. Cameramen exchanged quick glances. Audience members pulled out their phones before they were even out the doors. Within an